And in doing this particular SWOT analysis, we understood that after SWOT analysis, it created many of the opportunities, or it at least understood where exactly need to work in order to less or in order to decrease the severity of the threat or challenges that we might face because of the incompatibility or inadequacy of the strength. Then we went on setting up the goals, and in line to achieve these particular goals, we need some kind of motivations, and that's what we discussed about the internal and external motivations with its type, and with couple of examples that how really one would get motivated to. Now, the basic question that arises is, if I really wanted to assimilate, or if I really wanted to aggregate all the things that I studied till now, then this is an assignment where I can make use of this particular assignment, which is towards finding out the ability within ourselves in order to be a leader. Now, when I'm saying it's a leader, naturally we incline to think of our leaders from a politics. But that's not all the game that we all know, right? That's what we say, that we, each of us has got a leader within. It's only through the SWOT, it's only through the goal setting, it's only through the motivational kind of exercises, we definitely can come out with the quality that's called to be as in leadership. And a person who possesses that quality as in leadership, irrespective of the position that he or she might have, would be referred to be as a leader. It's as simple as that. And that is what I really wanted you to do this exercise with the following action items. Number one, identify a person whom you refer to be as a leader, preferably from a technical community, preferably from a motivational kind of personality, and try and get to know his or her merits or qualities that really made him or her as a leader. With this particular knowledge that you can grab it from the literature, grab it from the different sources, I want you specifically to write the report related to the achievements or the different qualities that he has exhibited through an examples. And that is what I really wanted you to write a report with reference of achievement or qualities that should be exemplified within case studies. Now this covers the 70% of the assignment, and rest of the 30% of the assignment, I wanted you to find out a leader within you and try and find out or try and envision the opportunities where you would get to know or where you get to execute as a leader within your team for rest of the 3 to 4 years of your engineering study. That's what I expect, like envision the leadership potential within you and project an opportunity to exhibit the same in future. Now, to be very specific, if I want to exemplify what exactly I'm expecting here out of the action item number 3, it's quite obvious that during this engineering curricula or during this engineering education, you are supposed to do this n number of projects. Each one of you at least going to do 5 to 6 projects, at least I'm talking about. And most of the projects, why did I say at least? Because it really depends on you. How much you really wanted to involve into experiential study, how much you wanted to be involved into the problem or project based study. That's completely given from you. But as a bare minimum, as a mandatory, you'll have to do 5 to 6 projects at least. And these projects, these technical projects would be expected to happen in a group. Now, when you're doing a project in a group, and I think this is not new to you, even in the school days also, many of you done your projects in a group. You know the different attribute, you know the different qualities that is being required for it. And there is a single person who always drives intellectually and emotionally that group towards the goal, or that group towards the final achievement. This is just an example that I'm trying to quote in the engineering education as an example of the project conduct. You might lead a group for a discussion, you might lead a group for a delegation of some purpose, you might lead a group for your, general discussions. You try and find out an opportunity, or you try and find out a potential opportunity, I would say, so that the qualities within you, you definitely would like to exercise. This is what I expect as a final 30% of the assignment that you will have to do for this particular assignment of this particular case study of the leaders. Is the objective understood?
Yes, sir.
No,
Yes, sir.
I really ask you that what outcome that do you expect out of this exercise? After
What are
doing,
the leadership's quality
huh?
and how to become a good, how to do a good leadership in our in future 3-4 years of college and after that also.
Correct. Very true. Very true.
Sir, a comparison between the leadership qualities of the given leaders and the leader within ourselves. We can identify that.
Very good. Very good. Very good. Very good, Atharva. That's what I said. That's what I used the word project an opportunity to exhibit the same in future. Are we able to make a resemblance with the qualities that we possess and the qualities that has been exhibited as a good leadership through some case studies of others? That is what the cross. That is what the correlation that we can really wanted to establish out of this, so that we can also keep on marching towards the same path. So I think, is this objective is identified, or is this objective is clear now?
Yes, sir.
So if this objective is clear, then as I said you, this is the last slide that I really wanted to show. Now let's move on to the initial slides for discussion of some kind of inputs from my end, so that that would facilitate or that would equip you in order to do this kind of exercise. Okay, so let's move on to the very first slide, title slide of it. What we really wanted to discuss out here is the leadership and management. Now, when I say leadership and management, many of the times it might be pursued it in the same sense, or it might be pursued it in the same context. At an outset, let me tell you that every leader would essentially, or every leader would be an essentially a good manager, but every manager would not have an potential to be a good leader. Do you agree with my statement?
Yes, sir.
I repeat the statement. Every leader is essentially a good manager, but every manager is not essentially to be a good leader. That means we now, in a context to understand what we really mean by management and what we really mean by leadership. That is what the context that we are supposed to understand in the beginning. And then what exactly leader is supposed to. Before I go to the formal slides, I really would like to know this particular difference from your perspective. Can you share some of the differences that you might know or you might thought like would be a correct one? The difference between management and leadership, or difference between manager and leader? Any offshoot thought that comes to mind?
सर लीडर वो होता है जिसको लोग फॉलो करते हैं और मैनेजर वो होता है जो वो जिनके साथ वो काम करते हैं.
Okay, okay, okay. A very interesting word and very appropriate word that Nayan has used is follow. Very interesting. Any other thoughts? Because when I say that each one of us has a leader within, that means each one of us has got a quality to be a leader. That's what we are trying to understand, in what context we really can make our attempt in order to lead on various fronts, undoubtedly. Is there any other thoughts that would definitely shape up our further discussion? Okay, shall I share my perspective now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, there is one comment in the chat. Leader is one who gives order and manager is one who manages the given order. Okay, maybe wordings are something like maybe intention or the underlying meaning that seems to be correct, but the meaning and the usage of the word called order is something that is not being accepted at the very first glance of it. But yes, yes, maybe whatever Siddharth is trying to point out, that might be the case. Okay, so let me share it with you, like whatever I could know from the differences of this leadership and management. So on the left of this particular chart, you will see what manager would essentially do, and as against of that, what leaders would do. Okay, and the very first point that is in line with what we have received in the chat, the manager is basically a position that works for the goals those are being already established. How many of you would agree with me thematically? The manager is a position that works for the goals already established. And as against of this, the leader is primarily responsible for setting the goals. And that's what maybe Siddharth wanted to point out, like uh, giving an order and making that order to be in execution. This is what I guess he might be in a way to communicate. Yes, he even confirmed, like, yes, this is the same thing that he wanted to communicate. Fine. So the very first difference that you could see is management or manager is a position which is being offered, while leader is not the position. And there is nothing even called to be as a self-claimed leader. You cannot refer yourself to be a leader just as you wanted to do that. Manager, obviously, it is by virtue of the orders itself, it is by virtue of the position that one would grab for it. So the very initial difference that happens to be the role which is getting played. I would say the leader would be as a path setter, or he would intend to set up a path to follow, and managers would decide the different strategies so that he makes sure that his team would march onto that particular path in order to achieve the goals which is being established towards it. As simple as this. The vision behind that particular goal, the vision behind that particular goal is basically from the leader. The execution to attain that particular goal is basically the role of managers. When a leader sets up the goal, he also knows in what way this goal is expected to be achieved. But he himself, the leader himself, might not get involved each time in order to get that particular goal to be attained from the team. And that's what he delegate that particular power in order to get that goal attained. You making use of its own strategy to the manager. And that's what it says, that manager manages the job, manages the work, while leader basically sets up the path to achieve that particular goal. Leader hardly do any job, hardly do any work. But the path setting or the trend setting kind of things is always being done from the leader. This is the very first prima facie difference that one could easily understand from this. The second difference, if or the second way of classifying or second way of describing the differences between this is very interesting. The manager's sense of life or identity is always limited to himself or a group of ordinates. And that's what we have, the different managers assigned for the different types of jobs. Like we have technical manager, like we have HR manager, we have, finance manager. We have different kind of managers. Those are being there playing a role in the organization. So their sense of identity or their sense of life is limited to that group of people only. As against of this, leader has got an expanded sense of the identity which crosses the boundary of only a specific group of people or only a specific group of ordinates. And that's what we tend to write it as a sense of life or identity is beyond oneself and even beyond some groups also. When we are referring that sense of life or identity, this particular word carries a very high-fold meanings into it. What do you mean by sense of identity? What is the way in which my existence is getting reached to the people? That is what tentatively we can refer to as a sense of identity. How my identity is getting pursued among whom? That is also what referred to as a sense of identity. What is the purpose with which my existence is getting pursued or my existence is getting known? That is also called to be as a sense of identity. And the purpose of a life or a sense of a life or sense of identity what is the spread for this particular phenomena of sense of life or sense of identity. That is what expected to be understood in this particular second difference. And as you can see very clearly, the managers, the basic job is to be constrained for the different execution policies within the group of people for which he is expected to manage the activities. And that's what we have one term called as a general manager. That means he is responsible for all the managers which are working for the different compartments. General manager is never being categorized in any one of the field. But when we call finance manager, HR manager, technical manager, they are being constrained to their own jobs. They are being constrained to their own groups. And maybe the person who is acting as a CEO or CTO for that purpose basically envisions the goals, basically envisions the different processes. Those might be expected to follow meticulously in order to go for the achievement of the goals that is being set. And as a middle level of executives, the role of manager comes into the picture. And that's what his sense of identity is limited to, because he might not be very thoroughly understand. It is expected, but many times it might not be thoroughly understand what is the undercurrent of, or what is the underlying current for this particular vision to set. Because he is being ordered, or he is being expected to set up the processes, set up the executions with some set of processes in order to achieve towards the goal. And that is what being constrained within some specific group of people, his sense of identity and would limit it to that particular group itself, while the leader doesn't have that kind of bounds with them. Their identity is first of all beyond themselves, isn't it? Leader is many times, when I'm saying this, allow me to make a statement that many times leaders are not being remembered by their name, but they are being remembered by the work that they are doing. It's not because of the name that they have, it's because of the work that they do, people tend to follow. There's a very basic principle that happens to be there in the leadership. And that basic principle is something like this. If we find to do that, but if we cannot do that, then I will see some role model to study, a role model to mimic the actions. Isn't it not that simple? When I'm doing this, when I'm getting myself involved into the process, am I not getting enough influence from the people of the person whom I'm looking at the role model? Am I not trying to mimic that particular person? So that talks of very simply, like something, the people who cannot really do it, they want some role model that they feel that they can do it. And that is what more specifically the reason to follow the leaders. It might be an emotional intelligence, it might be a maturity, it might be the way of the style of working, it might be n number of things, those are being there, which are basically becoming an influential factors. For leadership, you cannot comply, you cannot expect a persons to follow, but that is a process that happens naturally. That is the process that happens to be bound to be there by with an acceptance of the superiority or acceptance of the thought process that leaders would carry to that. And there the actual followers would stand in the line. Actual followers would be there in the practice. And that is never been the case with a manager. there is a very high exercise of manager turning into the leadership. It's not like manager cannot turn into the leadership. It's a very potential transition that happens that manager would turn into the leadership. A very potential transitions. Because manager is close to the leader, but there exhibits the gap which manager himself wanted to restrict, or he cannot cross that particular gap. That's what he remains to be as a manager rather than being a leader. Because manager always being confined with some thought process, always being confined with some set of rules and processes to follow. And that is never been the case with the leader. And that is what we are talking to some broader sense for sense of identity beyond oneself, or sense of identity beyond oneself or within that group of ordinates. Is this point made sense?
Yes, sir.
Have you really understood like how what really makes? Because I'm just trying to I really do not want the 13, 14, 15, 16 parameters to be judged against this. I'm just categorizing those particular parameter, and I'm just making these particular points to be consolidated within each of the parameters. Okay, I really don't intend to have the clear differentiation and classification of the leaders and managers. No, we really wanted to understand, first of all, the very first principle of differentiation between these managers and leaders. And that is what I'm making an attempt to describe this, even from the sense of identity point of view. Okay, fine. The next point that is being there, responsible for organizational growth. Obviously. So leaders are also responsible for organizational growth. But that is not the only responsibility that leader would carry. So apart from that, additional responsibility of individual growth is always being there on a leadership. When a people would follow the leader, it is obviously with one or the other expectations, and that expectation is always being boils down to an individual growth. Manager doesn't have that kind of bounding or that kind of restriction, or rather I would say that kind of responsibility to cater an individual growth. If the manager start thinking about an individual growth, he definitely would be marching towards the transition of leadership. This seems to be so simple, but at the same time, so difficult to practice it. So the point number 3 that we are trying to understand at the moment is the leadership would always, the followers would always think that individually even the growth should be there. The leader should think of all the actions of the leader should be there towards an orientation of an individual growth also. Apart from an institutional growth, apart from some kind of the broad policies, that also should benefit to an individual. And once that belief is being there among the follower, that yes, because of his or her action, the final beneficiary that is going to be me as an individual, then definitely people intend to follow that personality, and that personality becomes a leader. That very rarely happens in the managerial posts. Because manager goes with the rules, manager goes with the set of processes. His job is to get done. In any case, his job is to get done. He is more concerned towards the organizational growth. He is more concerned towards achieving of the goal. And if he adds some value addition to, along with an organization, individual also should be expected or allowed or encouraged to grow, then definitely that becomes the case of leadership. So there is a subtle difference. Ultimately, it's a thought process that when individual would grow, when an affiliated company would grow. And when a leader, or basically it's a leader who can instate or who can instigate this particular thought process among the employee, that your growth depends on the growth of an organization, he is a leader. And that's what additional responsibility of each one of us to believe that individual growth is possible through an institutional growth, through an organizational growth. That thought process is basically with a leadership thought process. And that is what we say, that it holds the additional responsibility for making believe that individual growth is also possible with the set of things which are going on in line towards the establishment of or attainment of this organizational growth or social growth, anything that you might say. So leadership is basically originated when the sense of belief becomes very strong about a particular person. Where for a managerial one, it's a sense of commitment of the work, or the employee would think that yes, I'm supposed to do this particular work within the boundaries which is being set by this particular set of process. I think so many things which can be discussed. But the point that I really wanted to highlight is at the moment. So leadership is more closer to, it's not only about the job, it's not only about the work that is to be done, but it is touching to the hearts, it is touching to an emotions. That is what referred to be as in leadership. For manager, many times I won't care what kind of person he or she has. As I am being appointed to follow his orders, I'll do that. That's it. And that never being happened with the leaders. Leader is accepted where managers are being appointed. That's the big difference. And that only happens with a influence, that only happens with the belief system that leader would able to sustain among the minds of people, among the brains of people, in order to follow them. And that is what we really wanted to know, the thematic differences between this management and leadership. If you go to the fourth difference, as we already started or opened that particular discussion from, the good managers not necessarily as a leaders, but the leader is always a good manager. Because he can really get to know the different processes through which the things could be established. But many times even the good managers are having a lack of vision of attainment of that particular goal, or having the lack of undercurrent of setting the goal and towards attainment of it. They are being confined to their boundaries of the set processes, and that's what they find the job that they're doing. That's what I said. A very subtle or a very natural transition happens to be. The managers are expected to be a potential leaders. And let me tell you as an outset, by the time you graduate, there would be very less positions referred to be as an managers. And there would be a very heavy demand sense of leadership. Leadership in technical things, leadership in thought process, leadership in design thinking, leadership. So many things are there rather than people calling themselves to be as a manager. They would definitely start believing that, yes, they are the leaders, they are not simply managers. Because that would be the need of our down the line 4 to 5 years. That is also one of the very subtle purpose for which we are discussing this. If you remember, in one of the session, I might have talked about the word management. If not, then let me just recall it one more time. I personally pursue this particular management word through its spelling itself. Okay. And how does that goes? I split this management as MAN, man, AGE called age, MEN, a plural form of man, and T, last T, that stands for a trick. So I do conceive that as it's a trick of a man with an age, that is experience, to handle the different men or different situations. I repeat, it's a trick of or tactic of a man individually with an age, with all his experiences, to handle the different men or different situations. So management happens to be by an experiences, where a leadership, that always happens to be as an instinct, and that always happens to be as a process, where management doesn't come day in, day out, but the leadership is always being there day in, day out. Something that you believe responsible for well-being of the others. Please mark my word. Something that the point where you started accounting yourself, accounting your acts for well-being of the others, that is referred to be as in leadership in a very plain words. Because unless that doesn't resulted into the well-being of others, the others would not start getting belief. And unless that doesn't happen, they won't start following. And hardly there is any leader who would claim to be as a leader without the followers. Lead and follow. These are the two terms that we are using, isn't it? That is what leadership happens to be, a tall order than that of a management. If you try and find out such kind of differences on the net and all that, in some of the article I heard like there are at least 70 million web pages that might be available who dictates or who explains the differences between management and leadership. But to be very honest with you, if you really understand the very principal current of the differentiation, principal current that makes or migrates or transient this management into leadership, or you really understand what really fetches the leadership for oneself, then that is what expected to be understood, rather than, and very aptly, as we always keep talking, it's not all about what we understand, but it's all about how do we practice it. If I know like, okay, there are 17, 18, 19 differences between management and leadership, and my act or my actions never allowed me to be as a leader, never allowed me to project as a leader, then it's of no use. If I am leading a team, then am I just expect to instruct or get the things done by an orders? If I'm doing that, yes, I'm a good manager, obviously. Because whatever is the targets, whatever is being given to me, I'm doing it very meticulously. I'm a good manager. People would probably remember me as long as I'm being there as a manager for them. Because there is no connect, there is no emotional connect, there is no intellectual connect that happens. Neither on the emotions nor on the intellectual grounds. But that's not the showcase with the leadership. It's all about influence. It's all about development of the belief system that yes, something which I cannot do, something which I intend to do, something I really can follow and do, he's a person that we refer to be as a leader. And that is what the bottom current or underlying current of this particular leadership. So many things can be discussed about the management and leadership. Okay. We restrict ourselves with only these 4 prominent differences that we really wanted to understand in order to practice it. Okay, in order to practice it, these are the 4 principal differences that we should understand very meticulously onto it. And that's what I attempt to discuss, only this particular 4 differences of it. Okay. So one more thing that I wish to just make you aware, which I read it from the literature only, that there happens to be the 2 basic principles of leadership. It's very interesting things are there. So it is just an extension of the discussion that we did in the earlier slides, but from the other perspective. There are only two basic principles that to be as in leadership that consolidate most of the 70 million pages that might have written for leaderships and management. And the number one that happens to be, it's not about you. What does it mean? When it says it's not about you, that means whatever action that you are doing, it is not for yourself. If the principal motive of any action that you do or any thought process that you do, if you as an individual being a center to that particular action, or that action happens to be a self-centric one, then that would never refer to be as a leadership act. That's what I made a word, use a word like well-being of the others. If I'm doing so great things, but I'm just constraining it to myself, I'm always keeping in a process like, yes, I will be benefited with that and all that. That is never referred to be as a leadership. That's what it's being said, that it's not about you. It's not about an individual. So action or any thought process should not be self-centric in that way. Further, it refers to be as the people do follow you because of the reason. It's not because of a you. It's because it is not because of you are as an identity. Why the people would follow? They follow it with a reason. And if you could really capture that particular reason at a very early stage, then definitely that particular belief system would be strengthened one, and people really keep following you as a leader. And that's what identifying the reason. And see, it's very interesting thing which I really wanted to bring at this particular forefront. Leaders would never be expected to exhibit the sympathy, but he is expected, or it is being expected from a leader to showcase an empathy rather than sympathy. People don't want that leader to sympathize about them. They want leader should be an empathetical about them. So what is the prima facie difference? Sympathy is something for just in order to just make others feel good, you are making him some kind of courageous words. But you are not being there in his shoes ever, nor mentally at all. So that act would only be referred to be as a sympathy. Rather than that, if I really intend to solve the problem, no, I'm coming to the point. When I really intend to solve the problem, then I really wanted to get into his or her shoes, or into the shoes of the victim, shoes of the person who really, for which you wanted to solve the problem. And that is the thought process that leader would always have with him. It's all about the empathy, not only the sympathy. Sympathetic behavior might not be appreciated, but empathetic behavior would make others to follow you. And that is what we call, it's not only about you. The second thing that is already being talked in the flow of discussion is people would like to believe in your words and actions rather than being there with you. Okay, as I promised to get it over by 2:30, because you have a session at 2:30, right? Fine.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I definitely would first of all float the attendance. Because already what is to be done, that I clearly narrated, right? In the beginning itself. So we are making this discussion supplementary to, in order to make you comfortable in doing so. Okay, while you fill up the attendance, I think we can do this particular exercise. The first principle, that it's not about you. And second principle, which is interestingly refers It's all about you. Isn't it strange? As a first principle, I'm saying that it's not about you. And in the second principle, we are saying that, yes, it's all about you. How does it goes? Okay, I guess many of you are busy in marking the attendance, so please do that. No issues. When I say it's all about you, in a single statement, if it is to be explained, then it goes explanation like this. It's all about you. Be the change you wanted to change. And this is the very famous tagline that happens with any kind of leadership. Be the change you wanted to change. And that's all about it's all about you. When it said that charity should begin at home, that simply means that the leader should lead by an examples. It's not just a piece of advice. It's not just the kind of the coaching businesses ever. He has to be on the ground. He has to exemplify. Then people start believing, and then people would definitely, whatever change that you really want to see, you should start doing that particular change within yourself. Then people start believing that, yes, that's what it said, that it's all about you only. If you could really be the change you wanted to change, then people start following you, and then people really start believing into your actions and words. And that is what we said to be as in, these are the two basic principles. Okay, fine. I think you can read this. Very interesting qualities, and with these leadership qualities,
Hello.
yeah, you can leave. You can leave. If you mark the attendance, then you're free to leave because you have the other
Yes, sir.
sessions. Yeah, you have other sessions. I understand.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.